Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, reaching way back for today's reprint edition of Word Balloon. Ross Richie, the founder of Boom Studios. This is way back when Boom was brand new, trying to do a lot of different things with genres. I've always been a fan of Boom Studios. I think they're a great comic book company that has always been innovative. They are to this day. They have certainly made their mark with things like Lumberjanes and all of James Tynan's stuff and Tom Taylor and, the Bezerker project that certainly shocked everybody with its success when they partnered up with Keanu Reeves and company to do a very successful Kickstarter campaign. Always innovating, always special. But this is way back when they were brand new and they were working with guys like Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatties. And it's fun to look back in 2006 when I had this first conversation with Ross Richie. You get his origin and Boom's origin in this very special reprint edition of Word Balloon from 2006. Looking back with Ross Richie and Boom Studios. Hi everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress with an important plea for 2023. You probably read the headlines. Word Balloon took a sponsorship hit that was pretty significant, and I'm asking you if you've ever been a fan of Word Balloon and considered making a donation through Patreon, a very meager but important subscription. I hope you'll consider it. It's going to be a challenging 2023, and I need your help. So if you like Word Balloon, if you enjoy the content, I'm not going to slow down and keep bringing you some excellent content. But I could really use your help via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. If you can afford the price of a comic book, if you can even afford $1 a month, it would be greatly appreciated and help the cause to keep Word Balloon going at the level and intensity that I've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years, and bring you a lot more content and a lot of great interviews and interesting things about the pop culture world. Patreon.com/wordballoon. I could really use your help. Thank you for your attention, your time, and listening to Word Balloon. It's the nation's second longest running comic convention. It's Ithacon, April 22nd and 23rd at Emerson Suites on the Ithaca College campus. Tickets are $20 for both days for ages 18 and older, $5 for ages 7 to 17. Kids 6 and under are free. Order tickets at ithacon.org. That's ITHACON.org. See DC Comic vets Mike Gold, Jamal Igle, Tom Pyre, Megaton Man's Don Simpson, J.C. Vaughn from the Overstreet Price Guide. The featured publisher, Ahoy Comics, will have a full crew of creators ready to serve. Ithacon 46 celebrates the 30th anniversary of DC's landmark Death of Superman event with the writer Roger Stern and colorist Glenn Whitmore. There will be cosplay contests, panels, kids' activities, and more. Plus, Ithacon is offering swag bags. These overstuffed swag bags offer over $20 to $50 value in comics, books, and more. These swag bags will be available for the ticket holders who purchase tickets by April 16th. Join us for Ithacon, April 22nd and 23rd at Emerson Suites on the Ithaca College campus. Order tickets now at ithacon.org. That's ITHACON.org. Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex has been a longtime sponsor of Word Balloon. I greatly appreciate it. You got to go to his website. You will find tremendous art from original work, covers, pages, fantastic lithographs, amazing posters. Every price point is covered, and every subject is covered at AlexRossArt.com. You've enjoyed his iconic looks at DC and Marvel, but also great stuff like his wonderful work on the Monkees, Monty Python, so many other great pop culture things that Alex has put his fingerprints on. His wonderful Flash Gordon poster that evokes the fantastic Dino De Laurentiis Sam Jones movie. Recently, Alex did things like the timeless Marvel covers, featuring great solo shots of all your favorite Marvel heroes, and of course his Fantastic Four full circle graphic novel still available. All waiting for you now at AlexRossArt.com. Welcome back to WordBalloon.com,
the Comic Book Conversation Show. This is John Suntress. Today, we speak to Ross Richie, the man behind Boom Studios. We'll get a tour of his titles featuring top comic creators like Keith Giffen, Joe Casey, Mark Waid, J.M. DeMatties, Chi, Dave Johnson, and others, paired with new comic talents like Andrew Cosby, Joanna Stokes, Ron Lim, and more. We'll also talk about the challenges new publishers face, getting retailers and readers' attention with fresh concepts, and talk a little bit about Ross's connections to Hollywood. Our conversation begins with a look at the summer convention season, which just wrapped up this month.
One of the things about Boom is that we celebrated our one-year anniversary at San Diego, and looking at how you kind of plan out the first year for stuff, we did San Diego 2 years ago with one book, Hero Squared, and the other book, Zombie Tales, which is near suicidal. I mean, how the hell are you going to cover a table and hotel rooms?
Yeah.
You got
no, I
comics.
understand.
So it's nuts. And Hero Squared #1 hadn't even shipped yet. But we managed to pull it off, which was amazing. But I looked at that as like a near miss. Like we could have like gone down in flames. And so when I planned out the convention season, I figured, we'll do 4, which is pretty substantial for a year.
Sure.
Because that's you lose so much time. So I was looking at San Diego, WonderCon, Wizard World LA, and Heroes.
Okay.
And Heroes went really well for us.
That's great.
And I think that some of it has to do with how things have built, because WonderCon was in February, and that was a show we did really great at all the shows. But the difference that you can mark is in February there were a lot of people that were unfamiliar with Boom, but at Heroes, I think the majority, like 80% of our business, was from Boom fans.
That's cool.
Where I think it was the reverse at WonderCon, where like 20% of the business was from Boom fans and 80% was from people just walking around and finding us. So I look at something like Chicago, and in retrospect, we probably should have done it, but I didn't. I'm very pessimistic when it comes to business stuff. I'm not the guy that signs up to, let's do 10 shows and everybody's going to love us and we're going to be huge. I'm more like, we're going to war. Let's not get shot.
No, I understand.
How many failed comic book companies are there?
Well, that's what I was going to say, and it sounds like, given what I know about how you're releasing books, it sounds like you guys are going about it the right way, as opposed to a lot of companies that just spit out so many titles immediately and don't really build up enough, momentum to sustain themselves, and they're left with a bunch of number 1s and number 2s with no other issues to follow.
I just look at it as like, you're at a party. There's this huge party. There's a really hot girl. Do you walk right up to her and say, let's get married? I've got room in my schedule next week to have kids. Because that's what you're asking these retailers. You're asking them to spend, non-returnable, a pretty big substantial chunk of money on your company, sort of first right out of the box.
Certainly.
Instead, what I would think is, at the party, I go to the hot chick, and I'm funny, and I go and I get her a drink, and then I'm hoping that maybe I'll get an opportunity to be able to ask her out, and I'm going to take her out, and we're going to go have a great meal. You just got to do this thing over a period of time to me. It's like where the marketplace, is very adverse to new publishers, and I know exactly why, because I've been a fan, and I've bought new stuff, and I felt jilted and sort of, screwed over by new companies. So we got to just, I regard it as like a romance. You just got to get to know each other and, spend some time, helping them to figure out who the hell we are.
Looking back on the first year, what can you tell me about the highlights and the lowlights?
Interesting. It's just been so much fun, just in all non-PR, interview voice. It's just really been crazy. Let me just tell you, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. And so kind of going through the process of rolling projects out and launching different projects and seeing what works and what doesn't, sort of, there are things that I expected to perform much better than they did, and then other things that completely surprised me. And it's tough, all these things, all these series I take very personally. I really care about each book. And, it's like looking at your children and figuring out which one is the prettiest or which one's the smartest. As a parent, it's just not something you want to do. But there's all sorts of fun stuff. Like one of my favorite underdog things that we publish is this series we do called "What Were They Thinking?"
Yes.
And it's for those who are unfamiliar with it, what we do is we publish it's comic books that are in the public domain that we then get Keith Giffen. The first one was Keith Giffen, and he rewrote it with Mike Lieb, who's incredibly funny and does great work, a new guy. And they went in and rewrote the word balloons to make the public domain comics a comedy. And we kind of likened it to Mystery Science Theater 3000. It's kind of like that, but kind of a remix or a mashup of, like, anyway, it's kind of hard to describe. But
well, if you're a fan of Woody Allen movies, What's Up, Tiger Lily?
What's Up, Tiger Lily? Absolutely. But knowing that, that movie's like almost like 30 years old, so some people might not get the reference, but it's so it's a lot of fun. And the first one just it was one of those books that sold a large number of copies after we shipped it, which I completely did not foresee. It just kept selling and selling and selling. People order more and more and more as people started to kind of get in on the joke. And then we did a second one shot, and I wanted to do them as one shots so that there was no sense of like continuity. Well, if you were late to the game, well, you had to get the first issue or something like that.
Sure.
And the second one outsold the first one, which, like, when in comics does issue number 2 outsell issue number 1? So we're doing a third one for Halloween. It's called Monster Mashup.
Cool.
It's all monster stories. And that's just sort of like, it's a silly little side thing that I just think everybody really seems to enjoy and have a lot of fun with. And, does it set the world on fire? Is it our archetypal property that everybody associates with our company? Probably not. But to me, it's sort of emblematic of the kind of things I want to do at Boom, which is just to have some fun with take a chance with a crazy concept. And, now it's attained a life of its own, and it's sort of rolling and doing its own thing. And I just want to be able to do 4 one-shots so that we can finally collect it into a trade paperback. That's really all I care about.
That's great, because it is funny, and I really enjoyed the first 2 issues. And am I right, Joe Casey even got in there as well?
Casey's was like bugging me to do it. Joe is great, and he's really awesome. I really enjoyed working with him, and everybody says incredibly positive things about Joe, and it's all true. And he was hilarious. He was just like, when am I going to write What Were They Thinking? Why aren't you asking me to write What Were They Thinking? I'm like, dude, how was I supposed to know? So we got him in on that. Dave Johnson was bugging me to write. Dave's never written a story that's been published in comics before. I think his earliest work, Earth Boys, he did some plot work on it and some stuff, but he's never written dialogue for comics or anything. So I could just hear Dave correcting me in my head. I've written Earth Boys. Anyway, but he's never written dialogue, and so Dave, most people would know that he's the cover artist on 100 Bullets, and he's an Eisner Award winning, and worked on Super Patriot and Superman Red Sun, and he's like a legend. And there's just some other crazy people. We've got Johanna Stokes, who's a writer on Eureka, the TV shows on the Sci-Fi Network. Came on a couple of weeks ago, did really well, and so she's writing on it. Anyway, so What Were They Thinking is a lot of fun. Exile is a book that we're publishing that performed extremely well. I was kind of surprised by how well it sold. So that's exciting to see sort of, it's not a project that has a brand name like, a big license project like, G.I. Joe or Transformers or something, and it doesn't have creators on it that are huge creators. Like this is Andy Cosby, who created Eureka. This is before Eureka came on the air.
Yes.
So most people are not familiar with him as a comic book writer. He did a series for Dark Horse called Damnation, which was a nice little hit, but I wouldn't say he's a comic book store brand name. And Greg Scott, who worked on sort of Dracula, super talented artist, has never really done a big extended run on any particular comic. So, and then Michael Allen Nelson, super talented writer, writing with Andy. He's doing Second Wave for us.
The War of the Worlds book, yes.
The War of the Worlds book, and so that. And anyway, they're super talented guys, and the book just sold really well, which I was very surprised by. So that's been a lot of fun. I think we're sort of very conservative with some of the things that we do. So that if something doesn't work, we don't end up jilting our fans. I think an example is Zombie Tales, the anthology prestige format 48-page square-bound book that we do. The first issue sold extremely well, and ironically still continues to sell well. And then the second book, not so much, and then the third one really didn't perform well for us. And so now we're kind of moving on with our subject matter to things like Cthulhu Tales. And so I was a bit disappointed with sales on the third one-shot of Zombie Tales, because I think that the stories are just really, really good. But at the same time, we could sort of move on without canceling a miniseries or not shipping product that we solicited or doing any of those things that would leave the retailers and the fans jilted. So I think it's really worked for us. So I would say it kind of broke my heart that Zombie Tales ran out of gas, but we did 3 really great one-shots, which I'm really proud of. We're going to collect into a trade paperback, and it'll be really cool for the shelf. And some people are still trying to talk us into doing more Zombie Tales. We'll see.
You guys are a very nimble company, because it seems like a lot of these concepts are starting off as miniseries. Am I right to assume that the plan is get a first arc out, make a trade, and get people aware of the product? Because, as you say, you're still really in only your second year of publication.
Absolutely. The way that we started was I actually had I helped revive a company called Atomica that originally was founded in 1989 and published an anthology book called A1. And through different years and different things, they would sort of resurface every 3 to 4 years and publish some more books. And the original A1 series had very small, little-known creators like Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Garth Ennis, Warren Ellis. I mean, it was incredible material.
Wow.
But when I was reviving A1, I was kind of publishing my own original projects. And the first one that I did through that was Hero Squared, and we did it as Hero Squared Exercise Special #1, which was a self-contained one-shot, because I had no idea that if we would have, I had never put a book together, edited it, published it, or any of those sorts of things. And one of the things I like to say is that I'm very well aware of my limitations. And seeing as how I'd never done it before, I wanted to kind of do it once and figure it out. And that book nearly killed me. I mean, it was brutal. Lots of moments that were really frustrating, and I made a lot of mistakes on it, but these are the reasons that you do it. But it sold really well, and when I parted ways with Atomica, I took the Hero Squared with me to relaunch it as a miniseries, and I definitely wanted to sort of be gradual, be very specific, try to be a sniper instead of have a shotgun approach.
Okay.
And do these things. I mean, I saw the company as a boutique company. We're not going to be sending Dark Horse Comics to the sidelines or Image Comics. We're not going to be these companies overnight, and it's going to be a slow, sort of gradual process to figure out how to publish comics and do it in a systemic way, and do it. Thankfully now I have a crew of guys that are helping me out. It's no longer just a one-man show. I've got John Luca Glazer is a guy that helps me with marketing and production. We have Marshall Dillon, who's my managing editor, and thank God, because I'm terrible with the deadline, and I don't know if you know, but that's not very good if you're publishing.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and so he handles all the deadlines. And then we've got Ed Dukeshire, who does my design and also does sort of crisis counseling and kind of sits me down and tells me it's going to be okay. So the world will not end. And so now I kind of have a group of guys that are all helping out. And so, yeah, I mean, I really want to sort of test things out first. We'll do a one-shot. We're kind of careful about what we do with a mini-series. And then once those things work, then we know that there's an audience for them, and we can sort of move into that position in a bigger way. And we're constantly evolving. I mean, when you say nimble as a company, I think that that's very apt, because my perspective was always that we needed to be a small mammal on the landscape, running around these other companies. Like we have to be more agile. We have to be. We're not flush with cash. We're not this company that is showing up with $7 million in our pocket, and we've got we just know we're going to take over the world. It's like we have to grow this company organically. Adding a single title to our lineup of just adding another monthly book is a huge cost expenditure. One of the things about comic book publishing that I don't think a lot of people know is, understand that we're paying page rates, and we're paying people when they turn their work in. We're not doing back-end deals for free or anything like that.
Okay.
The numbers would shock you. It's a very expensive proposition. And so for just on sort of a manpower scale and just a human, sort of on a human dimension, each title is a tremendous amount of time, energy, effort, and finances. So, it's the sort of thing I try to be very deliberate with and try try to know that this is a good way to put it. Whenever I'm about to turn my solicitations in, I look at the material that we're soliciting, and I try to take something off the list. I try to not turn in one of my books.
Okay.
Because I figure if I'm turning it in, then at least according to my own perspective, there's a reason for that book to be in the market. There's something that book says, there's something that book does that makes it unique. And if it's something that I can take off the list, then maybe it should be something I'm not publishing.
Sure. No,
a couple of times I've taken stuff off the list and said, hey, we need to rethink this project or maybe not do it.
Well, and it sounds like from an editorial philosophy that you are picking genres and story ideas that aren't being addressed by the mainstream, and of course that's always a good move, and I think there's a good segment of the audience, as the audience gets older, I think we all still like superhero books, but we're looking for something different, and also I think creators are looking to do something different, and given the all-star roster of writers and artists that you have, they seem to be responding to the proposition of working for you.
Well, I appreciate hearing you say that, because that's absolutely the approach. I mean, I think that if we have a business philosophy or a business plan, I think you pretty much encapsulated it, which is that there are creators that are working for Marvel and DC, and they want to, look at a guy like Keith Giffen.
Yep.
He's engineering Annihilation. He's doing 52 for Marvel and DC. He has material that he wants to do, like Tag, that he can't do anywhere else. People don't let Keith Giffen do horror comics. And I think that it's been definitely demonstrated that there's a big market for horror. I mean, IDW gets a tremendous amount of credit for really opening up that part of the direct market. And I think it's just insanity that no one wants to do a Keith Giffen horror book, no pun intended. And, I'll give that man a stage if that, and let him play if that's what he wants to do. So I definitely think, situations like with the John Doe project with Mark Waid, that's another project that is just not a conventional superhero book, and, Mark is interested in pursuing it. And I'm definitely going to give him as much room and positioning as he wants, and as much support for that project as I can, because, he's Mark Waid, and he's going to deliver, he's going to do great material. And that's definitely how I would like to position my company. I always kind of felt like, these remarks about Marvel and DC are perhaps more apt 2 or 3 years ago, because I think both of these companies have really changed and transformed recently. But it used to be that you started off reading comics with Marvel comics, like, let's say, you got in on the Slam Bam Jack Kirby action kind of principle with, Captain America and Spider-Man and that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And then sort of as you got a little older, DC was a bit more story-driven, a bit less action-y, and you kind of, as you got older, went over to DC and got a little more invested in their stories. And then moving past that, kind of in your late teens to your college years, then you would kind of get into a company like Dark Horse or maybe Fantagraphics, where you were looking for something besides, the familiar superhero tropes. And I think that that's sort of where we fit in on sort of the typical lifespan of a consumer, I would say, is that when you're sort of familiar with these things, how a typical Marvel DC book plays out, that we're over there to sort of do other genres. And in many ways, the story formulas that we're doing, the superhero stuff is a formula where you have a fight, and, it's the trick to be able to figure out how to keep those things fresh and interesting. And I think Marvel and DC are doing that extremely well right now. I mean, Civil War and Infinite Crisis, they're incredible, sort of, for decades, Marvel and DC will be working in the shadow of how good those projects are and how well they pulled them off. But, we're over here with a project like Tag, which is a horror piece, and it has its own formulaic sort of genre specifications, but it's a bit more fresh because you're not seeing, 200 titles on the market a month that are doing that sort of story formula. So, things like Zombie Tales, it's everybody understands the genres and the rule in the genres for, zombies with, Dawn of the Dead, Shaun of the Dead, and all that
Sure.
stuff. And I think we're just exploring different story formats.
Talk about Tag, because it's almost a combination of a horror story and one of my favorite noir stories, DOA.
That's great.
That's what it made me think of. So give the pitch on Tag for people who don't know.
I love that you make that comparison. That's great. We used to cite that comparison a lot. The way that I pitch it out is that you're walking down the street, you see a homeless guy, he looks like he's death warmed over, maybe he is, and he touches you. And when he touches you, you die. And the concept is, as Ring Around the Rosie's Pocket Full of Posies is based on the Black Plague. The children's game of tag is based on an ancient curse that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel. And the curse works like this. If you, let's say in this particular instance, we're pitching it out as, you, the audience member in the story, the lead character is Mitch. Mitch gets tagged by someone. What he doesn't know when this guy tags him is that the person who tagged him, he has a history with. And he has, that guy wants revenge on Mitch for slighting him in a way. And I'm not going to talk about how, because that's going to be revealed over the course of the story. But in essence, it's a curse that's passed down from person to person as a way to enact revenge on someone. And the parameters of the curse are, when you're touched, you die. And so you undergo rigor mortis. There's a condition called lividity, which is how blood pools in a corpse, because we have this blood that's circulating in our body all the time and the heart's moving it around.
Sure.
You don't really think about it, but what happens in a corpse is if you are laying on your back when you die, the blood will pool in your back and in the backs of your legs, and it sort of distorts the body because, the blood has volume and it has weight.
Sure.
So what happens with Mitch is blood starts to pool in his legs, which impedes his ability to walk. His eyes start to dry out because he doesn't have any way to renew the fluid in his eyes, so he starts to go a little blind. Another thing is that his brain cells are going to start to die, so he's going to start to have trouble talking and performing. He's going to get clumsier as it goes along. So we're trying to take sort of the real world medical problems that exist from corpses and apply that to the idea that you have to walk around and now you have to find who's the person that you're supposed to tag. It's kind of a puzzle that you have to figure out. And from those parameters, then you need to pass the curse along. And then one of the things that I love about this concept is, would you pass it along? Because in essence, what you're doing is you're killing someone.
You bet.
And I love that because the curse relates back to Cain and Abel, which is the first murder.
Right.
And it's sort of the legacy of that. And the real question at the heart, and I think that what's really important with series is to do things that have a theme, that have a story to tell, and to say, are you your brother's keeper? Would you be willing to kill someone else if it meant that it was going to save your life? What I like to do is that when we talk about this, and this is a horror thing, so it gets a lot of people uncomfortable, and I guess that's part of the appeal as well as the detractions to doing stuff like this, but I'd like to ask the question, we're all sitting around in a bar, we're having a couple beers, and you have a couple beers, and then I say to you, hey, here's a for instance. You have cancer, and it's terminal cancer, and we know, without a doubt, there's no way that you're going to survive. This is going to kill you. Now, would you pass that cancer on to someone else just to save your own life?
Yeah, that's a great philosophical kind of dilemma that,
And it's horrible,
Yes.
and everybody'd laugh, and somebody would say, no, I'd never do that in a million years, and then we'd have a couple more beers, and then I'd turn around to you and I'd go, come on. Would you? Well, would you give it to a stranger? Does it make you feel better if you don't know the person? Well, what about this? What if you give it to the guy that destroyed your life? What if you give it to the guy that caused your divorce, who made you, lose your house, who got you fired from your job, who basically ruined your entire life? What if the guy has it coming? What if it's the guy that you actually hate?
Absolutely.
And I think that that's sort of an interesting story. And, one of the reasons that Marvel and DC books, the characters are survive for so long, is that they're metaphors. Like the Hulk is a metaphor for rage. Everyone can relate to the Hulk. Everybody can relate to hulking out, getting so angry that you feel like you want to transform yourself into a monster. Batman is a metaphor for revenge.
Yes.
It's I'm so angry, I'm going to go into my cave and I'm going to train myself to be the best man that I can be to enact my vengeance. Every night Batman avenges his parents, every single night. And it's like, I think comics are very, very powerful mythologically when they are about something. When they're, if it's rage with the Hulk, with X-Men, I think it's teenage alienation mixed with a race analogy. These myths have power because they represent something that we find fascinating. And what I try to do is I try to steer the books that we're publishing at Boom to be about something, and like that is a segue to another Keith Giffen project, which is Hero Squared, which he does with James DeMatties.
Yes.
Which I think for your listeners that are unfamiliar with it, the concept is that there's a slacker in our world. He's Milo. He's just a regular dude who's completely directionless. But the next universe over, he's Captain Valor, who's like this Superman kind of character who can fly and has super strength. Well, Valor's world gets destroyed, and Valor gets transferred to our world, and he ends up teaming up with himself. And we had this. There was a website that reviewed it that called it a one-man buddy movie, which I thought was like perfect, because he's teaming up with himself.
Absolutely.
But the metaphor that's there and the theme that's there is Milo gets to, like, Keith used to always pitch it out to me of like, you're Milo, you walk up to the door, you open the door, and you look at yourself that's standing there in the door of Valor, and he's the perfect version of yourself. Like, how ticked off would you be that this guy, he's better looking, same DNA, he just takes care of himself, he's obviously worked out, he looks great, he's got
smarter.
perfect morals, and what's the difference between these two guys? Like, where did the road diverge? When did Milo start to make bad choices, and when did Valor make good choices? And really what the story is about the road not taken. Like, how would my life be different if I had made different choices when I was, in this particular case, it relates back to when they made choices when they were 14. But I think everybody can kind of relate to that, and I think that's really sort of what I want to do at Boom, is I want to make stories, regardless of the genre, whether it's a thriller, like, Talent is a supernatural thriller, or it's Tag, where it's a horror piece, or it's Hero Squared, where it's superheroes. I don't want to do superheroes just to do superheroes, because God knows Marvel and DC do that better than anybody on the planet. If we're going to do it, we're going to do blah-ha-ha funny Giffen and DeMatties superheroes, and try to do it and give it a spin. We did supervillains with Black Plague. We just want to do something different, and we want to bring something else to the table that other people aren't doing, instead of just sort of slavishly imitating what other companies are doing.
No, and it's, as you say, it's done with a purpose, and there's a kernel of a real smart story behind every genre and concept that you're bringing out there. And Hero Squared is a perfect example of that. Well, and you're hiring the right guys to do it. I mean, Giffen and DeMatties. Now, how are you hooking up with these guys? Are you approaching them and saying, I've got this boutique company, pitch me on some ideas?
Yeah, I had actually worked with Keith in a creative capacity on an Image comic series called Dominion.
Okay, I remember Dominion.
Yeah, and I had actually written the dialogue on that, scripted it, and I'm just not a writer. I was awful. If you liked any part of that comic book, it's Keith, and it's because he's so talented. Because every single interaction that I had on that, I was just trying to drive the truck into the ditch, and I just didn't know what I was doing. So I had a relationship with Keith, and I really I thought the Blahaha stuff was really funny, and I thought that it would be funny apart from doing it over at DC, and this was before they were doing the Defenders over at Marvel.
Right.
And I just thought that it was great material, and I called up Keith, and I said, I want to do, I basically want to do the Justice League with the names changed.
Sure.
Don't bring me Batman, bring me, Marsupial Man. Like, I don't care. Just give me the Justice League. And Keith was like, no, I'm not going to rip myself off. I'm not going to do the same Justice League concept. And then the funny part is, later on, as we're working on Hero Squared, and Captain Valor is in the series, well, DeMatties comes to me and he says, hey, Captain Valor could have been a part of a Justice League-like team. And I'm like, really? And DeMatties is like, it's going to be great. It's the Planetary Brigade. And we could do all these stories. I'm like, wow, that really sounds good. It was like too late for Keith to say no, so we got to do Planetary Brigade, but which Keith now loves. But anyway, I went to Keith and I said, okay, so you're not going to do Justice League. Well, I love Blue Beetle and Booster Gold. Why don't you bring me Booster Beetle and Blue Gold? Like, just change it, dude. Just make it do Toy Story. It's a buddy thing.
Sure.
This is just great stuff. And Keith refused to do that. He just wasn't going to rip himself off. So he has creative integrity. I have none. And he came back and he brought back Hero Squared, which is a buddy story, but just sort of done with a completely Giffen-esque take. And that's kind of emblematic of I went to Joe Casey and said, hey, I want to do a supervillain series, and he brought back to me Black Plague, and I basically approach these different creators or people that I'm interested in working with, and I say, hey, this is my company, and here's what we're up to, and this is kind of what I'm interested in. And Tom Snigoski, Chris Golden brought me Talent, and which was just a really great project. It was really smart and just completely unique, and they just knocked that thing out of the park and did a brilliant job on it.
Books like Talent and Exile, they're books that would fit in to compare them to things like Wildstorm or Vertigo and stuff, and it's great because while there's only maybe room for one or two Why the Last Man's or Ex Machina, I think with Boom, you're able to really come out with a line of things that are all unique. They all have very interesting high concepts, and they're just very different stories. And I think they're really cool. I'm looking forward to the Enigma Cipher coming up in September because I'm a huge World War II fan, and I think just the Enigma machine is such an interesting World War II story that a lot of people may not be aware of.
Oh, I think you're gonna really enjoy it. It's a project that we're getting some really great response to. And for the members of your audience that are unfamiliar with it, the Enigma machine was an actual code machine that was used by the Axis, the Nazis during World War II in the European theater of the war, and it's how they communicated and how they sent messages to their troops. And what happened was there was a movie that was made, U-571, which was about a true story that the Allies intercepted a submarine which had an Enigma machine on it. We got our hands on an Enigma machine during World War II, and we were able to decode what the messages that the Nazis were sending to each other. And, of course, the sad, tragic note is that FDR and Churchill decided to sit on a lot of that information because if we had interrupted some of the things that the Allies were doing, the Axis was doing during the war, it would have tipped their hand.
Sure.
And we kind of had to set up D-Day to be able to stop that. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff in it, and I think you're really going to get a kick out of it. We have a really big secret that is in the setup for Enigma Cipher for your audience is that, and this is a true fact, to this day, there are still a number of, I think the number is 4. There are 4 codes that have never been broken that the Enigma machine that we captured during World War II does not help us break. And there are universities that have been working on decoding these codes. And I think in the past 6 to 9 months, one university actually cracked it and brought the 4 codes down to 3.
Wow.
So our story kind of picks up with that and says, what if we were able to crack a code, and what if that secret in the code is so powerful that it actually changes the world? That secret information is a piece of information that basically changes the balance of power on a global scale. And that there are a number of people who have everything at stake and want to ensure that no one knows. So the lead character in the Enigma Cipher is the person who cracks the code, and she has to deal with the repercussions of the number of powers on a global scale shifting. And besides that, we get to punch Nazis, and everybody loves to punch Nazis.
I'm looking forward to Steve Grant bringing Whisper back, and I'm glad to see that it landed with you guys. That's a very cool concept that I enjoyed the original series, and this is a new character. Am I correct?
He's kind of playing fast and loose. I'm not even sure. I don't think he's even told me if it's actually the old Whisper or the new Whisper. It is. He sort of makes some suggestions and some hints. So I think it's a great place. If you've never read Whisper, it's a great place to get on board. And if you're an old Whisper fan, it's a great new intriguing take on it. I think his version is sort of taking Whisper and rebooting conceptually almost like the Ultimates or the All-Star line.
Okay.
Doing a new version of Whisper, which incorporates all the past aspects that kind of made the character work by also updating it for the audience. And I would say it's sort of got a Bourne Identity thing to it, I think. That sort of action.
That's cool.
It's very actiony, but it's also kind of a thriller. And it's situated in a post-Katrina New Orleans, so I think that's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. I want to ask about your background. I know that in comics you started at Malibu, but
Yep.
I've read in interviews with some of your creators, like Keith Giffen, that you were a script reader for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is that correct?
Yes, it's true.
Okay, now you got to tell me.
Don't
Like,
blame me, man.
no.
Don't blame me.
All right, I'm guessing then
I did
that
everything I could to not make it happen.
Junior was not your idea, I hope.
Hey, no.
Good.
Junior was before I was doing it. I tried to get him to say no to End of Days. So.
Okay, there you go. Well, yeah, now that's interesting. Now, if you could you tell us some films that you passed on that did become hits?
Wow, I'm not sure I've ever thought of that. Well, wait a minute. when I read stuff for Schwarzenegger, I tried to get him to not do End of Days, and I tried to get him to pass on the 8th day.
Okay. The 6th day or the 8th day?
6th day.
Okay.
There we go. You know that I love the movie that much. When I have no idea what it's called. Well, you know, I was just an old school Schwarzenegger fan. Like Conan tore the top of my head off. I loved him in Conan. I thought he was awesome in Terminator. T2 is one of my favorite films of all time.
Great movie.
You know, I'm a huge Cameron fan. And so I just, you know, it was like it was a dream. You know, the crazy thing is I have the autographed poster that, you know, Arnold's written, you know, inscribed to me, you know, thank you so much for, you know, being on my team and helping me out. And,
yeah, what was it? First of all, how'd you hook up with him?
I used to do some work for the William Morris Agency, which is one of the bigger talent agencies. So basically I worked for his agent.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what had happened was Marvel bought Malibu, it acquired Malibu in 1995. And my boss at my company used to be an agent. And he was an agent actually at William Morris prior to coming to Malibu. And so I'm a film school kid and went to the University of Texas and got a degree in film. And, you know, all of my buddies out in L.A., they were all working in the business. And I was interested in getting back into the movie business. And so my boss at Malibu gave me this contact name of a guy that was over at William Morris. And so I went to go to do some work for William Morris. I also went to do some work for some producers to find comic books to turn into movies. This is right around the time period when The Crow was a hit and The Mask was a hit.
Sure.
And Hollywood was sort of waking up to the idea that it didn't need to be Batman, it didn't need to be Superman for it to be a movie. So they were interested in going and finding these different properties and taking them to film. And, you know, obviously that was sort of a time period when not a whole lot of that went on. It certainly isn't as big as it is now. So I just sort of kicked around Hollywood. Then I ended up getting the rights to Mage with Matt Wagner and set that up as a producer myself over at Disney in association with Spyglass. Spyglass is a company that's headed by Roger Birnbaum, who's a film producer who has a list of credits as long as your arm, but he did a couple of his movies are The Sixth Sense, and he also did Rush Hour.
That's cool.
And so, and Shanghai Noon, stuff like that. So he's got a, he's a huge producer and always was a huge fan of Mage and Spyglass. We did that deal with Spyglass and with Disney, and we went through 17 drafts. And we also had F. Gary Gray attached as the director at one point, and we had Zack Snyder, who did Dawn of the Dead, who's quite a brilliant director, really talented guy. And I also was involved with, there was a comic book published by Oni called Trout. They did a 2-issue miniseries, and previous to that it was in Dark Horse Presents, and it was created by Troy Nixie, who's the artist on Ginny Finn.
Okay.
Most people would be familiar with him from that.
Sure.
But he'd done a lot of work in the business on different things, and so we set that project up with Phoenix Pictures in association over at Sony, and Phoenix was headed up by Mike Medavoy, who's a huge producer and is a guy that's worked in the business. He used to run TriStar Pictures, the entire studio.
Wow.
Yeah, he used to be a studio head. So just did different work. You know, that's sort of the comic books that we set up that you'd be familiar with. There's a lot of original concepts and screenplays and different things. The most recent thing that I was involved in selling as a film, as a producer, was Damnation, the Dark Horse comic.
Yes.
That Andy Cosby created it, and I worked with Mike Richardson to sell it to MTV, which is a division of Paramount. So it's over in the Paramount Viacom family.
That's cool. And and I noticed too that I looked at IMDb and I noticed the Talon and Tag are in stages of production as well.
That's right. I actually spent a lot of time last week listening to pitches from screenwriters to adapt Tag, which has been a great process. It's something I have a producer credit on, and I'm involved in the day-to-day process of putting those projects together. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a great situation where it sort of builds on the two things that I'm really familiar with, which is comics and then turning comic books into film. Because we basically, I would say the shorthand the past 10 years, that's something I've been doing from Mage to Trout to a number of other projects. Some of which I can't talk about.
I can respect that. Now, and also, I don't want people to get the idea, too, that Boom Comics are really just a bunch of pitches. They are great comics, and I think they do stand well on their own. And, again, look at the all-star writers that Boom has writing for them, when you look at DeMatties and Giffen and Wade and newcomers, as you say, like Crosby and John Rogers and some of these other guys you've got coming up, how are you finding the new talented people that you're working with?
That's a great question. You know, a lot of this, you know, I could probably give you some fancy-dancy answer, but the truth of the matter is once you kind of launch a company and you get this thing moving, what happens then is, you know, let's say you're working with a guy like Mark Waid, and Mark will say, hey, you know, there's this writer you should look at who's talented. Check him out. By hook or by crook, you end up, like, a good example is on What Were They Thinking, in which we're expecting a movie offer on any day, of course.
Are you serious?
No, not at all. Crazy idea. Yeah, no, it's completely not a movie. But I'm just trying to be a dork here.
I got you. It's all right.
But one guy that we're working with on that, Keith Giffen brought in Mike Lee to work with, and you know, Keith is brilliant at finding collaborators, and through the years has worked with guys like Robert Lauren Fleming and Alan Grant, and you know, that's just a few in addition to J.M. DeMatties, and he's just always collaborating with people. And
yes.
What I always tell people is he's like a jazz musician. Like, he loves to just pull out the instrument and just jam, and whoever
yes.
wants to jump in on the action, and he enjoys the process. So he brought in Mike Lieb, and Mike really distinguished himself working with Keith, and so now we're going to do a sequel to Tag as a miniseries, and Keith and I discussed it, and we felt like Lieb was at a point where he could take point, and so Keith has done the story, created the parameter for the miniseries, but the guy that's going to be doing issue-to-issue work is going to be Lieb. So it's just a funny thing, you know, as you're cooking along, you find, you know, I certainly have a lot of friends that from before starting Boom that I wanted to work with. One of the other guys that we're bringing in that I'm really excited about is a guy named Henry Alonzo Myers. He's used to write on an old TV show on the Sci-Fi Network called The Chronicle.
Absolutely.
Then after The Chronicle, he got hired to write on Charmed.
Oh, cool.
And then after Charmed, he worked on a little show called CSI.
Very cool.
So he's really worked his way up the ranks of television writing. Now he's working on, I think, this new fall series called Kidnapped, which is like the biggest show in Los Angeles. It's the one that everybody's so excited about and has the big buzz. And I go back with Henry back to when we were both readers when I was working for Schwarzenegger.
Okay.
He was sort of one of these guys that was shoulder to shoulder with me in the trenches. And, you know, it's just, he's always been a huge comic book fan. He's a freak for The Authority, and he loves Planetary, and we get to arguments about whether The Authority or Planetary is a better series. And, you know, we're all just geeks. It's all just fun. So, you know, for me, a big part of it is, like, to have an opportunity to work with people that I've, you know, just have relationships with and had a lot of fun with who've been my friends. And, you know, now I have this little stage, and I can kind of, like, you know, go sit in the audience and let them perform, do their thing, and, you know, try to give them an environment where they can have a lot of fun.
You know, and there's some cynicism, it seems, from some readers when they hear that television and film writers are coming to comic books. And personally, the experiences I've had with the books I've tried out, I'm always thrilled because they're coming with fresh ideas, story ideas, and they're able to, you know, adapt these to the comic medium. And I think they're really great creators, and I think they've kind of proven themselves. And you've got guys like Alan Heinberg and guys you're working with like Andrew Crosby who, you know, hand in hand with enjoying his Boom books. Eureka is a fantastic new series on Sci-Fi.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you like it. And by the way,
great.
The last name's Cosby.
Oh, okay.
Like Bill Cosby.
Oh, okay. Not like Bing.
Not like Bing, exactly. And actually, Andy, you know, when you work as a screenwriter, you have to form like a corporate structure because for tax purposes and things. And Andy's corporate name is Not That Cosby. It's pretty funny. Well, I mean, philosophically for me, what it comes down to is are the writers that I'm working with, well, God knows they're not coming to comics for the paycheck. You know, in comparison to what Andy gets paid by a studio to write a film, or what Henry gets paid by a studio to write a television show, you know, it's just comics is not this big financial destination. So really, what you have is you have guys that really love comics. I've heard apocryphal stories of some of the writers on some of the Marvel books that are screenwriters and have worked in the business. We're all sitting around at a table one night at a restaurant and saying, oh, you know, isn't it funny that we all wanted to be comic book writers, but it was so hard to become a comic book writer that we decided to break into film and TV instead. And, now we get to write comics, and it's like the thing that we're really excited to do. And so, I understand, the cynicism on the comic book fan perspective. I think that, it's a precious business that is sort of a world of its own that most outsiders don't understand. And I certainly have had a lot of skepticism and cynicism when I see some of the talent that's coming in to work on comics. And I think that, the proof's in the pudding. If they create great comics, then they create great comics. We don't know the next Watchmen or the next Dark Knight Returns can come out of a screenwriter for film or TV that is coming to the medium. I think what drives them is a love for what they're doing, and I don't think that's ever a bad thing.
Very cool. Now
they're not showing up to get rich, I'll tell you that.
Sure. Well, now, and then the other side of the coin, how do you get that mainstream audience to sample comic books? I mean, what's your philosophy for Boom in terms of, is it getting the books into different markets and different places so people can see them, or is it through adaptation in film and television? How does it work?
Well, I think that when it comes to adaptation in film and TV, and take this from a guy that has done a decade working in Hollywood.
Sure.
Hollywood's crazy. Well, we've seen that, in the adaptations of some of the comic books that they've done. You can't ever count on them. And if my company sells an option to Hollywood, that's great. Presuming, of course, that, that the deal is good and everything. I don't have enough patience for that end of the business to really kind of put up with charlatans and fools and people that are there to just sort of be
the big
Hollywood player and all that sort of stuff. Whatever. I know enough about the business to be able to tell when people are real or when they're fake. But the thing is you can't model your business on Hollywood, because tomorrow there could be a new comic book movie that comes out that has nothing to do with Boom, that's like apples and oranges, and it could fail, and then tomorrow everyone in Hollywood could decide the comic book movies are a dead end, and
sure.
they decide, hey, we're going to do movies that are based on comic strips, and they'll go to do Blondie or something, or they'll do the Better or for Worse movie or whatever. I mean, they're nuts, and the business changes, and what I'm interested in doing is building a publishing company, and if anything happens in Hollywood, great. But, one of my favorite quotes for Hollywood is from Ernest Hemingway. And what he says is, drive your car to the border of California, step out of the car with your manuscript, have them throw the bag full of cash first, then throw them the manuscript, grab the bag of cash, and drive like hell. And it's really appropriate, definitely maps to all of my experiences with them. Now, that being said, I really think that the place where all the growth is happening right now for companies like my company, which is not Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC are experiencing meteoric growth in the direct market.
Yes.
Projects like Civil War and Infinite Crisis are doing gangbusters, and I think are getting fans really excited. But I think where the people who are not doing superheroes are going to experience growth is in the book trade. There's been a huge growing segment for graphic novels. I think most people are familiar with the fact that manga has done well, but I don't think maybe some fans know that the book trade for graphic novels have done pretty well in the mass market, and that's something that we have not signed a mass market deal yet, and we're actually in negotiations with talking to a fair number of different players about it, and it's something that we're interested in doing. In particular, people are coming to us because they believe that the fact that we don't really do your average comic book, superhero book, makes us more attractive for a mass market audience. And I really think what's going to happen is over the next 10 to 20 years, in the way that the direct market has now created an economy that supports trade paperbacks with like Walking Dead and Why the Last Man and the Sandman and all the Vertigo slate and all that stuff.
Sure.
I think that's really going to be the paradigm shift, is that the book trade is going to become a destination for a lot of people. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's used to buy comics, doesn't buy them anymore, and he's like, of course, I'll take my son to Barnes and Nobles, and while he's going and getting his book, I could sneak over to the graphic novel section and pick up the latest Batman graphic novel, and I don't ever get to the comic book shops anymore, but it gives me an opportunity to be able to it's putting comic books in a place that I frequent.
Sure.
And so I think that the mainstream acceptance of graphic novels is only going to increase. And what I'm seeing day to day is how much more acceptable it is. I think the younger generation of kids that are in their teens all the way up through their early 20s, there isn't the tremendous stigma that was on comics that was there when, I'm an old man. So when I was growing up, it was like I didn't tell anybody I read comics because I was on the football team and I was still afraid of getting beaten up. So it's a tidal shift and it's happening. I think the past 2 to 5 years have been really pivotal, and it's this time period that we're all going to look back at and say that was when things really changed. Everyone looks back at the mid 70s all the way up to the early 80s as the time period for the direct market to be established with collector shops.
You bet.
And I think that's going to be, I would say, to shorthand it, it's probably like 1976 right now when it comes to graphic novels and mass market.
Have you gone to book expos then and seen?
Yeah, I went to BEA
and
was really quite blown away by how the big publishers and the big distributors, they are all excited about graphic novels, and there's been enough sort of stories on NPR and in the New York Times where people who are in publishing that are completely unfamiliar with comics, never read them, have no exposure to them, are educated enough. They're excited. They're excited by the medium. There's definitely no longer a need to go, biff, bam, pow, comics aren't for kids anymore.
Exactly.
They know it, and they're excited by it. I think the pressure is on the publishers to do good material. We have our opportunity. If we show up to the market looking to cash in, we're going to kill it. We need to just do great stuff.
DeMatties was saying the same thing about the book expos he's been going to for Abadazad.
Yep.
And obviously there to promote his own work, but is able to see what else is happening with graphic novels. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that clearly is the next growth market. But as you say, the quality needs to be there for it to sustain.
Absolutely. And I think that's we're in a great position, I think, as far as there is more great comics being done now than any other time. There's a lot to complain about. There always is. And, there's a lot of complaining that's done on internet sites.
Sure.
And I understand why. But the thing is I'm sort of I'm a glass guy. I'm a glass is half full guy. And when I look at the situation, there are more exciting, cool, well-written comics that are groundbreaking, that are doing things. I remember I actually was going through some of my comics from the early 90s, and I was looking at some of the art from like a Marvel or a DC, I've forgotten which company, and I looked at the artwork, and I was like, oh my gosh, I would not hire this guy. And I'm like a little company. I'm like a tiny little company, and like this guy was, and I don't mean that in a rude way to the artist, but it was a different era, in the way that you can sort of look back at Silver Age art, and it's sort of quaint and cute, but the draftsman, it's just a completely different world. And nowadays, with the art that's done at Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Image and all these other companies, it's so sophisticated, and the storytelling is so incredible. Every once in a while, I just think it's a good thing to stop and go, wow, this is a business that has never really had mainstream acceptance. It's always been sort of its own little niche, its own little world, but it's just raising its game and just doing really great work. And it's a great time period to be a comic book fan and to be reading graphic novels and love this stuff because it is sort of a paradigm change.
No, I absolutely agree with you, Ross. I as we wrap up, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to promote a couple books that are in the pipeline coming. You mentioned Mark Waid's John Doe. Can you tell us a little bit more about the project?
Yeah, the premise of John Doe is there's a real-world place called Potter's Field that is a cemetery for the unnamed dead.
Yes.
And the premise for John Doe is that there's a guy operating under an alias, obviously John Doe. Wow, that's my voice breaks like Bobby Brady. There's a guy operating under an alias, John Doe. He's trying to solve and figure out who are the unnamed dead in Potter's Field. And he's working with a crew of people who don't know each other, that are working all in parallel on every different aspect of society, from the sort of alcoholic reporter who used to work at the Times, who's now working at a tabloid rag and sort of barely has his dignity together. John Doe has a favor to call in on him, to use him as sort of an agent to work for him, to the coroner working in the coroner's office. All these different people can kind of help John Doe to investigate and solve the mystery of who the dead are in Potter's Field. the real question is, why does John Doe want to find out who the dead are in Pottersfield? But we'll find that out as the series progresses. The other thing I'd like to promote is we just signed a license with Warhammer and Warhammer 40K, which are two games that are from Games Workshop. They're tabletop miniature games. Some of your listeners might not be familiar with it, but one of the things is this company, they do $500 million worth of business a year. And by dint of comparison, Marvel clocks in at about $108 million a year.
Wow.
So this company is like 5 times bigger than Marvel. And they are brilliant at what they do. They create this really immersive fantasy world. Warhammer is the fantasy series. It is sort of set in that Lord of the Rings kind of world.
Okay.
And it's all, it's called Warhammer, but it really is about war. It is the company that did it is British, and I think that there's a certain flavor of almost World War II that comes through about sort of men in charge of troops that are having to make difficult decisions and are sort of having to sacrifice certain soldiers to be able to obtain the objectives that they have to do. So it's got a very dark, gritty feel to it, which suits me just fine.
That's cool.
Really like it. And then Warhammer 40,000, or Warhammer 40K as it's colloquially known, is the same well, it's not the same fantasy universe, but basically it's a fantasy universe set 40,000 years in the future. So it's science fiction, so they have drop ships, and they have lasers and bolter rifles, and it's this whole other world, and it's really dark and gritty. And the thing is Games Workshop publishes their own novels for Simon & Schuster. They do 35 original novels a year based on these two franchises.
Wow.
They have the THQ just did a video game based on Warhammer 40K called The Dawn of War, and it won Game of the Year. So these licenses, they're huge properties. We're actually one of the only people that has Games Workshop's franchises outside of themselves. They actually manufacture, distribute, and retail through their own stores, their own material. So we feel really privileged to be able to have this license, very much entrusted by this company, who has incredibly high quality standards and usually turns everyone away. So we're really excited about it. We think that there's really big stories to be told there. It's a really exciting world, a really exciting venue. We're getting some great art from Louis Antonio, who's an artist that did a San Diego Comic-Con preview book. Greg Boychucks is working on the license as well, and I think they're just ripping it up, doing some great work. And there's going to be some really cool, exciting stories. It's all written by Dan Abnett.
Okay.
And Dan might be familiar with to some of your listeners as a writer on Marvel's Annihilation. He also wrote on Legion of Superheroes.
Yep.
The thing is Dan, in the world of Games Workshop, is their R.A. Salvatore. He's their really successful novelist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was funny, I was talking to Ed McGuinness the other day on the phone, and Ed's doing the incentive cover for the first issue of Warhammer 40K, and Ed was laughing because his buddies don't care that he's Ed McGuinness, who's, he's Ed McGuinness.
Absolutely.
They couldn't care less about that. They're all excited that he knows Dan Abnett personally. And, Dan's a fabulously talented guy, does brilliant work, is really doing great stories. We're really excited about turning in all the work in on time. He's just been a joy to work with, a real pleasure, and Games Workshop's really excited about it. So it's I think it's going to be it's the first license we're doing through Boom, so I think it's a little different than what we've done before, and that's kind of a template for what I want to do with our company, which is to kind of surprise people, do some interesting new things. You never can quite get a beat on us. We might just show up and surprise you.
When is Warhammer going to be coming out?
That ships in November.
Okay, great.
Well, actually, that's Warhammer 40K ships in November,
Okay.
and then we were going to launch Warhammer for December, and we've decided to push it back to the spring and really kind of take our time and really get it right.
That's cool. And I'll tell you off the bat that I'm a big Jeremiah Harm fan.
Ah, cool!
And love to see Giffen and Alan Wagner working together like that.
Great,
I think that's really neat. And looking forward to Whisper and the Enigma Cipher. And, of course, I love Heroes Squared and Planetary Brigade, so I'm a Boom fan. And honestly, yeah, I think check them out, folks. Boom Studios has a lot of great books. And if your local store isn't carrying them, you definitely need to check them out and start ordering them because they are worthy of your attention. And Ross Richie is putting out a good line of books, and I thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you talking to me, and I really appreciate your time.
That's Ross Richie from Boom Studios. I wasn't being nice, folks. Check out the books. Really interesting concepts, great writers and artists. You can't go wrong with a Boom comic. And that'll do it for this edition of WordBalloon.com. Thanks a lot for listening. This is John Suntress. Keep coming back to Word Balloon. Lots of great episodes coming up, lots of great guests. And keep those cards and letters coming. John@wordballoon.com if you have any email suggestions on guests or show concepts, whatever's on your mind. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2006.